It's time for our leaders to act.
Demand a plan. Right now.
Right now.
You! Demand it!
Enough.
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 Go to demandaplan.org.
All right, we are back, 88.3 WXOU. We're about to talk a little bit of NFL free agency. We're going to get into the Lions, but we're going to start from a national perspective. Some of the notable signings around the league. Wes Welker leaves the Patriots and Tom Brady and goes and joins Peyton Manning in the Denver Broncos. Mike Wallace leaves Big Ben in the Steelers.
Yep.
And he switches to Tanny Hill and those Dolphins.
Good riddance.
Going to soak up the sunshine with all of that cash.
Yeah.
Deshaun Goldson goes from the 49ers to the Bucs.
Doesn't drop it.
And Danny Amendola leaves the Rams in the friendly confines and goes to the Patriots to replace Wes Welker.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, what are your thoughts on some of these signings?
I thought.
Oh, wait, hold on one sec. One of the ones I forgot, Steven Jackson.
Just today.
Yep, he signed with the Atlanta Falcons, which is a big signing for them. Go ahead, Tim.
I thought one that was very surprising was Welker. I thought he would stay with Patriots. I thought, he's Brady's his safety blanket and go-to guy.
He wears the Uggs.
Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of surprised, especially at the deal he got. It was only like 2 years, $10 million or $12 million. And you think that, and apparently the Patriots waited a long time to give him a deal, and they lowballed him. So if you look at that, I mean, how much were they offering him? If that's all he got from the Broncos, and I think, and I said this last night on Twitter, and I know I don't think it's stupid to think that Wes Welker might have 150 catches this year, which sounds astronomical, but he's gotten to like 129, 135 in his years with the Patriots. Peyton Manning's favorite thing is the slot. He has resurrected Brandon Stokely's career on like two separate occasions.
And he made Brandon Stokely's career in the first place.
Dallas Clark was everyone's favorite fantasy tight end, but he was a slot receiver. He didn't put his hand down. And Dallas Clark, I mean, he's kind of talented, but he just got open and Manning found him. And Manning makes us. I mean, you look at those guys that have come through. He makes receivers. He's one of those quarterbacks, obviously. The reason he's so good is because he makes his receivers. Sure, he has a guy like Reggie Wayne, but I would argue that a guy like Marvin Harrison, half of his credentials go to having Peyton Manning as his quarterback. Then you have guys like Austin Collie come through, and Anthony Gonzalez,
Pierre Garcon,
guys that play there. But I'm specifically those guys like Collie and Gonzalez that can play in the slot, and all of a sudden are good. And it's because of Manning's ability.
Yeah, and I think for Welker, I'm not 100% sure on this, but Welker might be the first player that will have been thrown to by both Brady and Manning, probably the two best quarterbacks of our era. Speaking of Tim and myself, he might be the. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he will. But I mean, to play for both the Broncos or both Brady and Manning, he might be the first person to do that. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not sure.
But if so, I mean, that'll be an interesting thing coming up because just as people debate Montana and Marino and all the greats, for two guys like Manning and Brady to play at the same time, Welker could be a piece in the future that people will look to say who was better. And obviously Manning's a little bit towards the end of his career. Than Brady in his prime, like Welker experienced in New England. But that's a big signing for the Broncos. And then Mike Wallace, like we said before, takes big money. I think it was $12 million a year.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, $12 million a year to go soak up the sun in Miami.
They tossed him the contract, and he dropped it. The guy, I have his jersey in my closet. Big fan when he first started. The guy is unbelievably fast. However, he is a poor route runner. He can't block. And, Ben can show off his arm and throw a bomb at 60 yards. You go on YouTube and you can see some amazing highlights. But the thing
Tim does every night.
Exactly. The thing about Mike Wallace is he is just so inconsistent. He's a guy that one game he can give you 6 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He can, and you're like, wow. And then the next game, he has 2 catches for 8 yards and a fumble. Yeah. And that's the kind of, for the kind of money they gave him, you want a guy that is a receiver that can, sure, he's a game changer in the sense that you can
Well,
turn a drive into
he's a
one
home run hitter. That's
absolutely,
what he
you
is.
can turn a drive into a one-play scoring drive. Absolutely. But at the same time, that's really all he is. And the Steelers are kind of hoping that he could become more, and they tried some different things with him. Last season, I don't know how many times they did the quick little 3-yard out screenplay, and he can't follow blockers. He can't – he's just – and then he fumbles, like, a lot, which is just – his ball security is questionable. His route running is questionable. And, I love the guy to a point, but – good riddance, really. For that kind of money, I'm glad he got it. Good for him. That's great. It's a shame that, in the way the contracts work now, that the Steelers really only got 3 years out of him for a guy that, a second-round draft pick, the way that worked out, and he was able to sit out and get the tender. It was kind of odd the way that all worked out. But,
Yeah, he's getting paid a lot of money.
To run really fast.
Right.
And that's it.
He's not Calvin Johnson. He's not Larry Fitzgerald. He's not Andre Johnson.
But he wanted to be paid like it.
Right.
And his contract rivals that of a guy like Vincent Jackson, and it's not quite
he's not even Wes Welker. He doesn't.
Well, they're different players. It's hard to compare them. But Wes Welker, if you ask me who I'd rather have on my team, I'd probably go with Wes Welker because Wes Welker can, sustain drives. Mike Wallace can, he can score a touchdown once every other game maybe, but he's not going to be the guy that is going to be he's a number one receiver, but he's not. It's strange because he can be in some games, but in some for a guy to get paid that kind of money, you just can't just disappear in games. And too many times last season, and I've watched basically every Steeler game, he's done that, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, he's not a guy you can put man coverage on, but teams know how to take him away from
and
the
especially,
game.
A guy
when you go to Miami and you're going to be the guy,
right?
You're not in a situation to succeed. Not that I think he really cares because he got his payday.
Exactly, that's all.
But he's not going to be in a position to succeed because he doesn't have somebody that's going to detract attention away from him.
They have they're going to have a second-year quarterback in Tannehill. They lose their guy, coming here to Detroit, and Reggie Bush, their running back, and he was their number one runner last season. And the Dolphins are kind of strange. They just signed Brian Hartline, who, unless you're kind of like a deep fantasy player, you don't really know who that is. They gave him a $31 million deal over 5 years to be opposite Mike Wallace, and he's got a great set of hands, and he's a great receiver, but I don't know if he's worth that
much. He's got
much.
Great heart.
That much money. You look at his stats. He had 74 catches, 1,000 yards, and 1 touchdown last season. And then Mike Wallace,
talk about those fantasy stats.
It's just very strange. So we'll see what what the Dolphins are like moving forward. But we spent a lot of time here on Mike Wallace.
Yeah.
But
all right, moving on. Danny Amendola signs to the Patriots. They're just kind of grasping at. In my opinion, they're kind of grasping at straws, trying to replace Welker.
And it was, he looks
it was
like immediately after. It was immediately after that Welker went away.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting if you look at some of the stats, he's very similar to Wes Welker before he became a Patriot. You look at some of the stats; they're almost identical in terms of number of catches and yards. I saw last night. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but almost the same numbers. So maybe again, talk about a quarterback that can make his receivers. Tom Brady is maybe the master of that. He won Super Bowls throwing to a cornerback in Troy Brown. He is. When he finally got
Troy
a guy,
Brown, David Givens, guys like that.
When he finally got a guy in Randy Moss, he set records.
Yep.
If you gave a guy like Calvin Johnson to Tom Brady, he'd throw for 5,000 yards unquestioned. That's just the kind of guy he is. So Danny Amendola is a guy that maybe can become that next Wes Welker. And like I said, before Wes Welker became a Patriot, the only thing he was known for was really his punt returns in Miami. People are like, Wes Welker wasn't like this guy that was catching 80 passes a year. And then all of a sudden he's catching 120 from Tom Brady. I think Danny Amendola could maybe be that guy in the Patriot system.
Yeah, he could show up, he could not. I don't know. We'll see how that one works out.
He got paid though from the
did.
Patriots, and the slot receiver market is kind of not as high as some expected it to be, and it kind of hurt guys like Welker going to the Broncos and not getting that payday maybe that he thought he deserved. But I think the Patriots could have done worse.
Definitely.
And in terms of replacing
and
a guy like Wes
Welker
Welker.
signing on the second day of free agency definitely helps the Patriots a little bit. They had plenty of time, and they really got down to it and signed Amendola as soon as they could, as soon as they found out that Welker was leaving. And then the last one I just wanted to get into, Deshaun Goldson goes to the Bucs. I mean, he gets paid a bunch of money. The 49ers defense, every time you make a Super Bowl, you're going to try kind of get stripped of your
Absolutely.
free agents if possible.
Absolutely.
We're seeing that with the Ravens right now also.
Absolutely.
And so he goes to the Bucs, gets paid a bunch of money, so that's a good signing for the Bucs. And Steven Jackson going to the Falcons, that's a big one. It's going to help Matt Ryan. They're going to lose Michael Turner, but Steven Jackson's a great running back. I think he's probably going to be on his last legs. Maybe this season will be his last one of true productivity, because he does have he's the only active back with over 10,000 yards rushing.
I agree.
And so I think his tread's getting pretty thin, but I think he can be productive in an offense that also features somebody like Julio Jones, like Roddy White, like Matt Ryan, and they like their backup running back also.
I think a new home could really give him a fresh start. And he put up some really good numbers behind really nothing else in St. Louis. He was their offense, and he put up some great numbers being the guy.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about is he the next Sean Alexander, the next Priest Holmes, the guy who has a great productive 4 or 5 seasons, and then he kind of hits the wall. And I don't know if that wall is going to be this season, but I think it's coming up pretty quick.
Probably. I mean, and that's the thing with running backs. It's tough to be a feature back and stay consistent.
Right.
But I mean, I think it's great for Atlanta. But they get rid of Michael Turner, and we talk about the Patriots doing worse with Amendola. The Falcons definitely could have done worse. Steven Jackson's a top 10, if not top 5 back in the league. And like you said, he might be nearing the end, but you put him in that offense, a very high octane offense, and I think he fit right in, especially since he is able to catch the ball out of the backfield.
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing. Speaking of catching the ball out of the backfield, segue. That's what we call a segue in the biz.
Absolutely.
The Lions. So the Lions sign Reggie Bush. They sign Jason Jones, and they sign Glover Quinn. Mm-hmm. They went 3 for 3. They were all along. People were saying these are the 3 guys they want. And they sign them all on the same day, and they get the job done. From the Lions of last year, who they re-signed Kasim Osgood, who's a wide receiver type, not really a factor at all. But they re-signed
his name gets
him.
called, when they do the kickoffs.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's the first guy down.
Yeah, he's a special teams guy, a quick guy. Corey Hilliard, an offensive lineman. They re-signed him. He's kind of a depth guy. Amari Spivey, Joke City. Don't really know why they brought him back. He was a 3rd-round pick out of Iowa a few years ago. Brought in as a corner. Couldn't really play. They switched him to safety because he was slow. And now they bring him back. He's really not very good. Once again, kind of a depth guy. I think they just signed him to a 1-year contract. DeAndre Levy, who was their starting outside linebacker from last season, he's coming back. And Chris Houston, which is definitely the biggest signing of them all. Mm-hmm. He was their number 1 corner last season, and he's coming back to be that productive corner that they were missing from last year.
Right. Like, Reggie Bush is the sexy name, and people are going to be wearing his jersey in the stands. Everybody knows him, especially from his Heisman winning days at USC. But I think the 2 biggest things for them is getting Quinn and getting Chris Houston, because their running game wasn't a big factor last season, and Reggie Bush definitely helps that. Speed guy. Can he be the number 1 guy? That's kind of questionable, but getting that secondary in order that's their biggest weakness. It has been for the past 2-3 years. Absolutely. That's why 2 years ago when you actually made the playoffs, Drew Brees made you look silly in the playoffs. That's why on the final game of the season, Matt Flynn sets all the Packers records. That secondary is what needed help, and I think getting Chris Houston, while people are never going to really be excited about re-signing a guy, especially a guy like Chris Houston that you only really talk about him when he gets burned. He's not a guy that's going to give you 10 interceptions in a season, but at the same time, he's a guy that's a solid corner.
Yeah, he's not Darrell Revis, but he's
Absolutely
not
not.
bad.
Absolutely not.
He plays his role, and he's the number one corner on this team. Right. And do I think he's probably a number 2 corner if you actually have a solid secondary?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he's important to bring back because
if you would have lost him, you
would have no secondary.
Right, and then you're probably forced to draft a guy like a D. Milner there at 5, and you're starting.
The keyword is forced. They still could do that.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm much more comfortable with a guy like Chris Houston playing corner, even if he's matched up with D. Milner, than D. Milner being your number 1 corner.
Yeah. If you bring in a guy, he can be your number 2.
I mean, rookie cornerbacks are one of the biggest things to adjust to in the NFL because college and pro, in terms of what you can do,
and the speed,
and how much contact you're allowed, big difference. And
1 foot down instead of 2, or 2 instead of 1.
I much more comfortable. If you put D. Milner out on, I don't. Greg Jennings isn't. He might not resign, but. Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, you don't want him on Brandon
Percy
Marshall.
Harvin, he's gone, but I'm sorry, he's a Seattle guy. But regardless, you want your corners to be, above average.
Right, you want an experienced guy matched up on another team's number 1 receiver, which is exactly what Chris Houston is. So that was a big re-signing. And then obviously Reggie Bush comes in, Jason Jones, and Glover Quinn. So you add. Jason Jones probably isn't going to be a starter on the team.
Depth guy. Huh?
Yeah, he's going to be maybe in the rotation, as they say, especially the Lions.
The Lions love doing that, absolutely.
Yeah, they have 7 or 8 defensive linemen that they bring in. He's a guy that can play outside mostly, but he also is an interior guy that can play as well. The Lions have a lot of depth at defensive tackle with Sue and Fairley. But they also lose a guy like Sammy Lee Hill, and they lose Cliff Averill, they lose Gossard Chairless on the offensive line, and then they lose Drayton Florence, who was a corner in the secondary. Not a great player, but a depth guy, like we've been saying, and he goes to Carolina. Averill went to Seattle, Sammy Lee Hill went to Tennessee, and Gossard Chairless went to the Colts in Indianapolis. So, but with Bush though, what I wanted to talk about was. Reggie Bush gives the Lions that home run threat that Javid Best provided in the first 5 games of the 2011 season.
In the 10 games that Javid Best wore a Lions uniform on the field, they were 9-1.
Right.
And now, some of those numbers, there's not a direct correlation, but you got to account for that.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's gonna live in all Lions fans' memories when you had that awesome week in Detroit sports where you had the Tigers in the championship or the championship series, and the Lions played on Monday night for the first time in like a decade and a half at home, and Javid Best ran that like 88-yard touchdown or whatever, and he just ran by everybody.
Yeah, he makes one cut in the offensive line and just takes off.
And it's a shame.
Mikel LaShore cannot do that. Joique Bell cannot do that. Reggie Bush can do that.
Well, there's an interesting stat that last season, Mikel LaShore's longest run of the season was 16 yards. Reggie Bush last season had 10 games in which he had at least a run of 16 yards or more. So he definitely brings that dynamic. What I question is, can he be that number 1 guy? I think you can maybe you have the combo deal of him and LaShore, but he did that in Miami for a year, but can he stay consistent with that? But I think what's nice for the Lions is that he isn't. I don't know if you even expect him to be that.
No, you don't. I think that you have LaShore, you have Bell, who played a great role for the team last year.
Bell was your best running back last season.
And then you bring in Bush, who can be that speed guy, and he can be a guy when you can do an unexpected run on a 2nd and 4, and maybe try and pick up a big gain. Or you can do screen passes. Right. You can do the infamous swing pass that a lot of people like, myself included. So I think he just gives you a lot more diversity in the offense. It helps Stafford once again, and it gives him another weapon, which a lot of people complain about, that he doesn't make his own weapons. But he,
what gives you diversity in the offense? Chris Durham.
That's another re-signing. They bring back Chris Durham to
Wes Welker's diversity in your offense
to come in and to training camp. But Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. Tim was making fun of me through text message yesterday, saying the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl now.
Oh, well, yeah, I heard some of these fans around here, and they're like, oh,
yeah,
Reggie Bush. They're like, he won in New Orleans. He's coming here. Easy job at best 2.0, and that's all great. Like I said before, I think the biggest signings you had was maybe that re-signing of Chris Houston and then Quinn. Quinn only we were looking at his stats. He only has 5 interceptions over 4 years of play, but he's somebody that is better than a Spivey, who's a re-signing. And Delmas is never able to stay on the field.
Right. I mean,
and Delmas might leave. You don't know. Delmas isn't for sure back in the Lions uniform. I'm a big fan of Delmas when he stays healthy, but Delmas wasn't exactly a ball hawk either. I mean, he was a big hitter. He only had like 2 career interceptions.
And he was a popular player here. There's rumors that he's probably going to go to San Francisco. It's not confirmed, but that's the idea right now. The Lions are still in the mix as well as the Rams, but the Niners are really looking at Delmas. But I think a Quinn on the field is better than Delmas not on the field.
And what's nice about these Lions signings is that they really, in my opinion, they didn't overpay for anyone.
Right.
You look at free agency. Sometimes people just get stupid money, like Mike Wallace. Where you're fascinated by a certain skill set and that speed. Reggie Bush, he doesn't have Mike Wallace speed, but he has above average speed. Definitely,
he's not what he used to be. He's not Reggie Bush from USC. I mean, he has some years on him now, and he's not as fast as he was, but he's still very fast. And he gets a 4-year, $16 million contract,
which is definitely reasonable.
Right. I mean, the rumors leading up to that. I mean, Reggie Bush had been rumored to go to the Lions, and the market value was really like 4 years, $20 million. So a $16 million contract over 4 years for the Lions is a big win, and it's only $4 million guaranteed. So if you only keep him for 2 or 3 of the 4 years and you cut him, it's not that big of a loss, and it's only a $2 million cap hit for this coming season,
which is huge.
Which very big.
That's
very big.
That's the thing about, and I know you're going to get into some of the other figures, but that was the thing that surprised me with Lions. I know they were like, "Woo, we got some money. We're gonna," but I was like, "Where's all this money coming from?" Because I know at the beginning of the year, before free agency started stuff, a month and a half ago, people are like, "Lions are like 15 over the cap, $15 million over the cap," and it was like, where did all this money come from? And I know that some guys retired, they cut some guys. Vanden Bosch was going to be a big cap hit.
I mean, you get rid of Vanden Bosch. Jeff Backus retires. That just was announced today. The 12-year starting left tackle. He plays 192 of 193 games over 12 years. He's done.
Michigan difference.
Yeah. Matt Millen's first draft pick is now done. He retires, and you get some money from that. And, I mean, Tom Luan and Martin Mayhew know more about the books than any of us do. So,
absolutely.
I mean,
it was surprising, and then people are like, "Man, we got a little bit of money," and you hear different people around the city talking. They're like, "Hey, let's get this guy. Let's get this guy. I want to bring in this guy." And I think the Lions did not spend beyond their means with the money that they were able to do through some different things, cuts, restructures, stuff like that. They were able to really get good value for their money.
Right, and more value. Glover Quinn, 5 years, $23.5 million. It's like $4.7 million a year. For a starting safety, that's pretty good.
And absolutely, and I like I said, I don't think they really reached for anyone. And there's still emphasis, especially on this year's draft. You have to make these picks count, because I've never been a big fan of filling gaps and holes with free agents. They're nice to add on, and free agency is great for a team that is close to making that run,
like a Seattle,
absolutely.
Like a Denver, like
San Francisco is like they went to the Super Bowl, now they're reloading.
Right.
They're like, okay, we'll take Anquan Bolden, we'll take these guys. That's what I like. That's what I like to see free agency. So many teams were in there at the bottom. They have big cap room. They're just, you look at what Miami's doing. Is Miami really a better team than they were? They lose Reggie Bush, they lose some guys, lose Carlos Dansby, and then they're like, we're going to give Mike Wallace all this money. And sure, he's a sexy name, sell jerseys, and people are excited, but is that going to tack on 4 or 5 wins?